I thought you were recording me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bart, I
would have really told I practiced that speech long.
Okay, well, if you're almost done, I'm ready to start again.
Yeah.
President Johnsen, we appreciate you spending some time with us. We know your time is actually crushed right now, so I'm not going to read this long and illustrious resume here. We all know you. We appreciate you being here, and please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Maybe my, channeling Bart here a little bit, my biggest point of pride, actually, is in 2004, Bart and I played on the Alaska State Championship Masters softball team.
We want to tell how many teams were in the tournament?
Yeah. But they were from Anchorage, okay? And I was sitting at the end of the bench after the game, and our coach came up and said, "Hey, Jim, they want you up in the tower." I go, "Why do they want me up in the tower?" Because I don't hit home runs. I don't even think I hit a double the entire season, certainly not in that tournament. So I went up to the tower. Guys like Bart and other people that, really hit the ball. Went up and they said, "You're the MVP." And I go, "What do you mean I'm the MVP? I mean, I'm just a guy who hits the ball and runs a lot." And it turned out that it had something like a 700 batting average or something insane, and that's how they pick it, is just getting on base. So in any case, I mention that not only because of my friend Bart, but also as a philosophy about how to proceed through really difficult times. It's a bunch of singles. It's not a bunch of home runs. Unfortunately, it's a bunch of singles. And that's what we're trying to do. And the challenge of our situation now is there's so much uncertainty. Now we're trying to reduce that uncertainty as much as we can, but it's just a bear. I mean, think about where we are in the year. We're in August. We're already in the year, and our current budget, which is law, is $135 million down from last year. And so when you think about, okay, what is your burn rate? I mean, many of you are business people. What is the burn rate you need then, to sustain at that lower level? I mean, that's a 41% lower burn rate of state funds. Wow. And you can't do that really quickly. I mean, Hamilton used to say, we don't mortgage well. And it's true. We don't mortgage really well. So we've taken some short-term steps, but then we've put into place processes, to try to not only meet the challenge, but, and this is a hard thing to think about when you're dealing with people's lives and when you're dealing with a community's economy and a state's future. All right, is there a way that this might be an opportunity? And I know that's hard to do because we're dealing with pain. I mean, as I was coming up, Rick mentioned, Chris Birch's passing. I saw that this morning on the media, and I just thought, damn, this sort of puts it into perspective, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, all the stuff we're going through really sucks, to use a technical term, but wow, lives are involved here as well. And I sit in the church my wife and I have gone to every single Sunday since we've been here, has a lot of university people in it. And I sit there in the pew as people are going up, for communion, and I go, ouch. And I don't know which ones are still going to be here, which ones won't as a result of these budget reductions, but it just personalizes it when you watch people go up with their kids and you think, God, these are really talented, good people in our community, and these budget cuts are, if they take effect, are just going to gut it. It's very, very painful. But again, at the same time, we're going to have a university in a year, and in 10 years, and 20 years, so how can we sort of move past those early stages of grief and start thinking about how do we position ourselves to be as strong as we can possibly be. And so that's why, I've been doing a ton of not only hard work, but sort of soul searching about how to think about this process. And the model that I find most helpful these days is, well, one is Moses, and his challenges and his tribulations as a leader. Now, the problem with that metaphor is that he never got to the promised land. And so I said, no, I'm not going to use it.
And he spent 40 years trying to get there.
A brilliant leader, but he never made it all the way to the promised land. But another one is maybe picking up on, something I'm sure Dr. Fate has done some thinking about over the years, and that is evolution. And how do successful species adapt? And typically what they do is they really try to, it's an inherently conservative process because you're trying to conserve what is most unique and most core about what you are. You shed what is not working in order to thrive and adapt and innovate in the future. So that's the driving question for me now at the University of Alaska is what is precious, what is most core, what is that which we must have, no matter what, in 5 years, 10 years, etc. Well, what's not quite that must-have? We can get rid of that not quite must-have so that we can keep that must-have and actually grow it and invest in it for the future. And that's a hard one because those people and those programs that are not in the must-have, so there are casualties, which is a horrible thing to think about. Acceptable casualties, right? I mean, fortunately, we're not talking about really people's capital L lives. We're talking about their careers, and we're talking about the things their own personal investments, their families, etc. So it is extremely challenging. So that's the sort of way of thinking about what we're doing internally, and I'm going to talk about the budget situation in just a minute too, to update you on that. But the Board of Regents, of course, has said fiscal exigency. They declared it in 1986. Now, there's some folks out in the media who said they never did. No, they did. I got the words. They declared it. Now, a certain regent by the name of Ed Rasmussen had access to an airplane, and he hopped on that plane and flew down to Anchorage, and his neighbor, Bill Sheffield, happened to be the governor, and Bill Sheffield at the time said, okay, and backed off. So they never had to implement any of the tools that fiscal exigency provided the president at that time. The one move that was made, at that time, the president got to decide it. And the Board of Regents changed it shortly thereafter to say, we decide fiscal or financial exigency. The president can recommend it, but we make that decision. So that's the case today. The board made that decision a couple of weeks ago. What that enables us to do, essentially, it's not bankruptcy, so please don't equate the two, and often people do conflate financial exigency with bankruptcy. It's not the same thing. It is not a judicial process with lots of precedents for the purpose of helping a company survive or make it through to reorganize with less debt, to absolve it of debts. It basically just shortens notice periods for terminating faculty and staff. That's what it does. So particularly with faculty, tenured faculty, instead of doing a program review, and then based on and these take time, a program review, and then using a hierarchical order of who goes first, sort of a layoff list, if you will, it's probably a more familiar term for y'all. And then 12 months notice, don't need to do the program review, don't need to use the layoff hierarchy, 2 months notice. So it's a powerful tool, but that's all it is. And it's actually negotiated with the faculty union. So that's there. Now, how we're going to use that will depend on the ultimate level of the reduction, right? We do need to move quickly because we're already in the year. We're already behind. So we're going to need to use the tool to make changes quickly. Depending upon what the budget ends up being, we may not need to use it as deeply. Does that make sense? So I still think we're going to need to do some of it quickly, but if we can get some money back in the budget, it won't need to be as deep a cut. We won't need to make as many program reductions. To the organizational structure, I know it's a question on your minds, this issue of a single accreditation. It's a big deal. And back in 1974, and I think prior, maybe even in 75, it was one university, right? And it had locations across the state, but it was one University of Alaska. I spoke with someone recently who was deeply involved in the university back then, and this person said, Jim, if we had the technology back then that you have today, we would never have split into 3 universities. Wouldn't need to. Because back then, we had to mail purchase orders back and forth and get signatures from people in Fairbanks when we're down in Anchorage. We don't need to do that anymore.
Excuse me for interrupting, I could write a book about that. I was president of the board.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad you're here. Another, Mary Kay Hughes is our longest serving regent. She quoted her father, and this isn't for the record, so please keep it to yourselves. You can record it. Well, she said, her father said, they will rue the day they created 3 universities. Aside from that, we ran models. So I asked each of the chancellors to come up with, okay, what would you reduce? You know, here's your pro rata reduction. How would you reduce? And they gave me those plans. I put those numbers in a model, and then I ran numbers for, well, what if we were to eliminate the 3 separate accreditations? Put those in a model, and it turns out that we can, no matter what our spending level is, so even if it's the deep cut that is the governor's budget, or it's the much better budget that the legislature, thank you, has passed for us, we still can spend a larger share on academics and student services under a single accreditation model and less on administration than if it's 3 universities. And actually, the most expensive model is to take statewide out. There are some folks down in Anchorage who I refer to as secessionists, and because they think they can go it on their own. And actually, a 3-university model is the most expensive of all, because you have to have auditors and lawyers and all kinds of people in multiple places. Whereas now, in our hybrid model, a lot of that administrative stuff is centralized in statewide. And then they don't have any lawyers on the campuses, and they don't need auditors on the campuses. Each campus does not do its own financial statement. We're one financial legal entity. So, and the cheapest actually is to look at ourselves and say, hey, we've got 27,000 students. We're smaller than UW. UW doesn't have 4 CEOs. It doesn't have 4 CFOs. It doesn't have, 3 or 4 of all kinds of things. It has 1 of most of those things. And so it's able to have a leaner administrative structure and put more of its resources into what matters, which is what you did for me, right? It's being a faculty member. It's helping our students succeed. And with current technology, we can do a ton of this stuff online, number 1. And number 2, our nursing program now is our only fully statewide program, academic program. And it's based in Anchorage, and yet there are UAA faculty right here in Fairbanks teaching nurses. And they are down in Ketchikan, and they're in Juneau, and wherever. 1 dean, not multiple deans. I look at business, we have 2 we kind of have 3 business programs. And I ask myself, well, what's probably the best business school on the planet? Okay, I know what it is. It has 2 campuses, one in Philadelphia and one in San Francisco, not 350 miles apart, 3,500 miles apart, 1 dean. So we can do this. And I think one of the things that it's going to help us with is trying to get turf out of the equation. And I know that's really, really difficult in a place that's shaped like that, with distances like we have and the deep cultural roots that people have in these different communities, right? But if we can talk about the University of Alaska in or at fill-in-the-blank location, we can deliver all across the state. And in fact, some of our community campus directors have said, hey, Jim, I really like that model, because then the people here in fill-in-the-blank area will have access to all the programs you offer across the University of Alaska, as opposed to just those ones under my regional university. Neat. So access, I think, becomes a strong interest. On the online front, I mean, your university right here in Fairbanks has over 30 completely online programs right now. And the eCampus here is top rated. And, I'm glad you're here to sort of represent the K-12 voice. We're in talks now with the Fairbanks North Star Borough and a whole bunch of school districts across the state to offer dual enrollment opportunities. Hi, good morning. For college-ready high schoolers. I mean, we have physical middle college high schools in Mat-Su now and in Anchorage, where high school kids are on our campus every day, getting credit, university and high school, and the bills being paid by the state essentially through the base student allocation. And actually our tuition is cheaper, less than the base student allocation. So there are literally hundreds of kids on the UAA campus every day right now. and out at the Matsu campus. Those kids come to us for college. They already have a year of college done. They require no developmental or remediation when they come. So that's a real positive. But what about those kids in the other 50 school districts across the state? And I say 50 school districts, that's crazy to have that many. But in any case, that's the K-12 world. I don't have to worry about it. But how do we help those kids too, and get them in rural Alaska and in other communities access to university programs? So the online thing is going to be very important. In terms of process, the Board of Regents is meeting September 12th, and I'll have a plan for them at that time on what we're going to look like. It's not going to get into the details of things, but it's going to say there's going to be a college of X, there's going to be one college of engineering, business, education, science, arts and letters, education, et cetera, across the state. So that'll be about 9. Right now we have about 19. So how many fewer deans is that? How many fewer associate deans is that? Right? We're going to look at the research institutes as well. Do we really need the large number of them, or can some of them, come together and share administrative stuff? We're looking also at the outreach part of our mission. The land grant type outreach, extension, those sorts of things as well. We're also doing a big survey, and you all, or many of you, will get the opportunity to participate in a survey that's starting up next week and a run for a couple of weeks. That'll also be reported to the board in September. So they'll have all that public input. They'll have our plan at a pretty high level. So the number of colleges, and then the programs that are going to be within those colleges. Those all require board approval. And then in addition to that, the plan for a single accreditation. Let me talk about that for just a minute. It's fundamental. I mean, you got to have it, period, end of report. We are working with the accrediting body every week. We have a call with those guys. And in fact, today, there's a call with the U.S. Department of Education, because they're involved in this too. They have to approve institutions for their eligibility for federal support. I would note, parenthetically, our Alaska's pro rata share of federal grants and loans is 50th in the country, in addition to having the lowest college going rate in the United States. Not good, but in any case, we're not taking advantage. It's really our students aren't taking advantage of those resources from the federal government. Close paren. What we're looking at in terms of the big picture for accreditation here is to do the cutover next summer. That's pretty fast for this, and we need to maintain our 3 institutional accreditations, Fairbanks, Southeast, Anchorage, through this year while we're making these changes. And what we're likely to do is borrow one of those accreditations. Instead of making a whole new one up out of whole cloth, let's just borrow one that's already there, the broadest institutional accreditation, and then do what we call a change of control. Actually, it's something that businesses do a lot. You do a change of control, and then we do a second step called substantive change. So we sort of change the lines of reporting of these academic units, the fewer academic units, starting in January, and then cut over next summer to a single accreditation. There is some risk in it, or maybe uncertainty is a better term for it, but the commission is working very closely with us on this. Here are the criteria, here's the process, and they're staying in close touch with us. So I think that'll go well. So budget update. We again appreciate very much the legislature's putting $110 million back into our operating budget. That means a $25 million cut though from current year. We've been staying in close touch with legislative leaders. I had a call yesterday morning with the speaker. And to help understand, what the legislative dynamics are. Actually, Bart and I talked to, and I talked with several senators yesterday. And then we've been talking with the governor. The governor, for some reason, here recently has decided to reach out and start talking with us and seeking an agreement. We met with him the first time on January 8th. And I introduced the concept in that meeting of a glide path or a long-term plan. And I twice, again, through the legislative process, as late as May 31st, gave him, a case that could be made for this. And my only response was on June 28th when he gave me a shout before the press conference and said, here's your veto. Thank you. But in any case, recently here, thanks to people in this room, he's been reaching out And so we actually talked last evening, and we're talking again this morning to see if we can't come up with something that avoids a veto this year and then provides some, again, gradual path, a manageable path to a reasonable funding future for us. And it's not just the operating budget, it's also the capital budget. We've got a monster deferred maintenance challenge, so we need some funding there. We also have debt and on facilities. You know, our friends in Anchorage have been able to build new buildings without going into debt. I mean, yeah, Alaska Airlines Center does have some debt on it. But here, you know, the E-Life, the new engineering building, we had to take out some debt to finish that off. The combined heat and power plant, significant amount of debt. So our debt burden is primarily on facilities in Fairbanks. So we're going to try to get some capital funding in the next couple of years for that to reduce that burden on us. At the same time, we're going to be pushing on, again, making these changes, trying to become more cost effective. You know, we've got a really great vision for the university. I would encourage you, if you get a chance, to go to alaska.edu, scroll down the page a little bit, and you'll see a vision of the University of Alaska as of 2040. And it's an interactive website. It's super cool. It's got about 25 really neat new initiatives, new programs that frankly have roots in excellence, things we're doing today. Well, thank you, Jomo. There's 6 narratives in it. So one of the cool things about looking into the future is you get to take advantage of, again, going back to evolution, you get to take advantage of the difference between sapiens and Neanderthal. And the difference is that we make stuff up. We can make stuff up. And so that's what you getting it? Oh. No, it's a spelling issue. Yeah.
Computer's a little slow this morning.
Which one?
Sure, the computer. Sure, blame the computer, Jomo.
Operator error.
I always blame my staff is your right representative.
There you go.
Just keep talking.
Wow, it is slow. Well, we went through a really interesting process and came up with this vision for 2040, and you'll see in it a network, basically. It's a matrix type vision with people in the middle of it, as opposed to 3 silos, right? As opposed to making people navigate us, the whole idea, there you go, thank you. Yeah, that's it. And it's really cool. And our next step with that, if we had a little bit of cash, is we would put it on a game platform so that it actually learns from the interaction that people have from it. And actually the fun idea here, and I'm looking to get some private support to implement this, is to actually create the Alaska game. And it's to get it into 7th grade. Because that's what kids are learning from, and that's where they're spending their time, is gaming. So what if we created a game that allows our young people to create their future, to build Alaska? I mean, it's kind of cool, right? Because one of our challenges in Alaska is what is our pull? What is the economic pull in Alaska that keeps people in school all the way through? Right now we have the leakiest education pipeline in America. And that's for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, what's the pool? Where's the Silicon Valley across the street where I can go work if I stay in school and get an engineering degree or a computer science degree? So, well, who's going to create that pool, right? It's just not going to happen. But we need to be involved in creating that pool. And that's the purpose of this website and the idea of a game.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And then get it into the schools, right? And then update it. So there would be social data, economic data, cultural data. I mean, you could really have a blast. Transportation stuff, business development. I mean, it would really be super, super fun. And the people who worked with us on creating this UA 2040 website, it's a joint venture between a group at USC called the World Building Institute, led by the guy who created Minority Report. He designed that movie for Spielberg, and he designed other futuristic films. And the other guy in the joint venture is the founder and CEO of the largest educational game company in the country. So kind of interesting.
Is that information included on the website?
Yeah.
Like the founders? And
yeah. You see all that? And we made up a timeline to 2040, which is really cool. I mean, we got a Nobel Prize by 2040, and you know, why not? And so so the driving questions are, what if? Why not? So much of our conversations in Alaska are, oh my God, you know, we're playing defense a lot. there's not much offense being played. I mean, there are some examples of where it's being played. I get that, but so that's what we're trying to do. And I'll borrow another Hamiltonism. I have tons of them in my head. One of them, he was telling me one day about, he grew up in Florida and did a lot of crabbing. And so we started talking about it. He said, you know, one of the interesting things about crabbing, you carry a bucket with you. He said, you never just put one crab in the bucket. Well, why is that? Well, it'll get out. But so that's why you always get two in there, because the other one will pull the other one down. So as long as you have two crabs in there, you don't need a top on that bucket. Yeah, so thank you, Jomo. Yeah, so here's and up in the upper right corner, that guides you to what's in the website. So there's the home, some really cool things about Alaska, how we got here, so that's our path. And then we have a new president. It was hilarious. They actually had an aged, because they're Hollywood people, they took a picture of me and aged me. I was 2040, my wife looked at that and she said, so we got a much better looking president for the future. But it's a really cool website. And the whole idea here is to put the student in the middle. The student is the whole purpose of this. So that's the whole idea of this linear line here, is everything comes to the student. The center of everything is the student. So, you know, I encourage you to play around with it, and yeah, and we didn't use any state money to build it. So that's part of the vision. We have great values at the university. We've got super goals. I mean, we've got goals out to 2025. So when the governor talks about you need outcomes, we got them. You know, economic development, research, workforce development, educational attainment, and cost effectiveness. Hopefully the conversations here will come together pretty quickly because we need certainty fast. We need stability, and we need to be off the table. We can't be in more battles next year and then the year after that, because it's just like that crab in the bucket. It's just pulling us down. So all the media is about fighting cuts. That's not an inspirational vision for our university, right? So if we can get off the table, then we can pivot to the positive. And that's what I've been talking to the governor about, is give us the chance to pivot to the positive. And then if we've got a 2 to 3 year run, we can make good stuff happen. Even if it's a little less money, if we know what it is, we're good. So that's what we're trying to put together right now. But enough of me. I'd love to hear questions or comments from y'all.
You know, I remember a number of years ago, the university leadership pivoted fairly strongly toward workforce development because they thought that would resonate with the legislature. And as a result, it's left a lot of what you might call liberal arts, what I call the path toward learning critical thinking, which seems to be lacking in the administration right now. And in your vision, how can we maintain that? Because to me, I don't care what your degree is in, but if you've learned, you know, those concepts, it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of understanding, you know, to actually proceed in today's world.
Well, thank you, Gary. I think it's critically important. I think you'll see, if you check out this prospectus here, you'll see the liberal arts. There will be a college of the arts, maybe college of arts and letters or something like that among the colleges. I also think that the liberal arts are critical for economic development, business development, not only in terms of critical thinking, but creativity, especially in this new economy. I have a very personal example of a I guess she's 34 now, 34-year-old daughter who got a degree in classics. I mean, can you think of a less practical degree than classics? I don't think so. And yet she went out. She went to graduate school at a really good school too, started a podcast. She then got popular. She then sold the podcast to NPR. She made a nice chunk of change from that. And now she gets a guaranteed percentage of all the underwriting on her podcast, which is a very popular podcast. Well, what she does in this podcast is interview famous scientists, authors, and actors about what they nerd out about. Okay, it's called Nerdette Podcast. I'm not here to sell it. I'm here to say that but now that you know what the podcast is about, is there a better degree for what she does than classics? Probably not. Because it's all about creativity. It's all about reading like crazy and connecting dots and having fun, with Doris Kearns Goodwin and, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Tom Hanks and Stephen King and Amy Tan and, you know, just this huge long list of, you know, really creative people. So I agree with you. It's very, very important. Brittany?
Yeah, and my apologies, I have to get going here. So, Brittany Smart with Mayor Ward's office at the borough, and just, we would love to know when you need us engaged, you know, to the extent, what action items are you asking from us, when is a good timing for it? So just a general request, I know you're pretty on it, but just making sure that when needed, we can mobilize and get stuff to you.
Well, thank you, I'd appreciate it. I think, Brittany, what would really help here in the near term is more and I appreciate, I mean, the mayor has been great for us. It's maybe a conceptual thing to think about, and maybe it's just the change of a preposition. You know, right, under a single accreditation, what we're talking about really is the University of Alaska at or in a location. We'll still be here, right, under a single accreditation. There may be athletics as well. We're working that with the ADs and the NCAA. There will still be a strong, strong, strong presence here, but it may not be without the in or at, right? So if it's a single statewide accreditation, there is that identity issue that I get completely. But I think the meta point here is there will be higher education, there will be research, there will be jobs here in Fairbanks. When I said it to the AEDC last week, there will be research, there will be higher education, workforce development happening here in Anchorage. The question, though, is it owned by that specific institution under its single accreditation? One model here, and that it's not a driver, but it's a factor, is how our military, how Fort Wainwright is operated, right? And as I understand it, there's a post commander, right? Yeah. Post commander doesn't command the Stryker Brigade. So I can envision having campus directors who support, make sure all the facilities are there and the parking's done and student services are taken care of, and the academic programs are just as in the military. They're, you know, they do tie up at one point or another in the hierarchy, but they have a separate line. And so I see that model being effective here in this case.
The concern when they split into regions was one largely of allocation. And several of us were actually for maintaining a one accreditation system, as I recall. But you get the board imbalanced, the governor's prerogative. There was one time when we had very good regional representation on the Board of Regents, and things worked out fine. But if you get an unbalanced Board of Regents, if the governor unbalances that board by appointments, well, you can get public sentiment and you can get board sentiment that will change the allocations regardless of whether it's regional or not. Mm-hmm. So you really have to have some safeguards going to the future to maintain your vision, because if you don't, there's going to be somewhere down that road where there's going to be an imbalance either on that board or public sentiment, and the allocation of each of the university campuses, we'll call them, will change.
Yes.
And that will depend largely on politics, as I've said, and on the composition of the board. But it's a real threat. It's a real threat. So you have to have some kind of a safeguard written into your plan, President Johnsen, that will safeguard against that going into the future.
You got it, Regent Fate? Yeah, no, you're right. One of the things we've been putting our arms up against here is the OMB, and with the governor's permission, attempt to get in and really essentially gut research at Fairbanks and more at Fairbanks as well. And the governor in a recent conversation, backed completely away from that. But I completely agree with you. We've got to respect the region's constitutional authority to manage the university. Now, to this governor's credit, he has made selections that are actually very sound, and I guess in one part maybe regional, but he's got two good, strong regents, at
It
this
seems like you have a good board now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of regionalism, there always is, but, you know, when I came to the university back in 1996, the chancellors used to meet with their regents before regents meetings.
Right.
No more.
The only other thing that I worry about, and that's because of what you read in the papers, not because of what I really know inter sanctum with you and the board. But we actually sued the state on constitutional grounds that they were trying to run the university and make policy through the manipulation of the budget.
Right.
And we sued, and it was settled out of court.
Mhm.
But the implication simply is that as I read the newspaper, it seems like perhaps the governor and some are trying maybe to do the same thing. So the admonition simply is stand on your feet, you and the board, and make those decisions as you, as educators, know how to make them.
Thank you, sir. And there is an issue right now that goes to that, and that's the separate appropriations. Instead of a single appropriation, we have two. And this one has UAA statewide and UAF in it. This one has UAS and the community colleges in it. This is the one he vetoed. He didn't veto this one. But what we've communicated back to him is that our structure is not separate in that way, such that if, I mean, UAS can't operate without statewide. The community campuses can't operate without, in the case of UAF, without UAF. And it can't operate on its own without statewide. And in fact, we did the cost analysis, and of the $57 million in that second appropriation that has UAS and the community campuses in it, fully 12 million of that would be needed to pay the regional universities and statewide for services they provide. And I've been really clear with the governor about that. You know, he's been talking with some legislators that, no, your community campuses are fine, they're fine, they're fine, don't worry about it. Not so. And that may be, I hope it doesn't come to shove, but it's push at this point, to your point.
My question was actually in line with Bud's. Universities.
Where's your glass?
Over those halcyon years where there was a lot of money, you know, it seemed that they were happy to take these specific appropriations and direct them where the legislature had directed, i.e. to some of these, pardon my language, but glamour projects, like the sports facility down in Anchorage, full payment for the engineering building down in Anchorage while they made loan packages for the stuff up here. I do wonder if it might be time to go ahead and do a court case, not settle it, so that it is settled under law and settled by the judiciary, that it is the Board of Regents who gets to direct where funds go once the appropriation comes to the university.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how things go. There's always a risk in litigation, and there are smarter people than me around who can help think through that, but prefer not to have a fight if we can get an agreement with it.
Jim, there's I'm going to call it a growing recognition, but there is an understanding across America that Alaska is actually America's Arctic, and you know, it seemed obvious, but when Alaska was on the map, you know, right next to California, a lot of people didn't get it. However, as we look at growing our state in the future, and Alaska being America's Arctic, that's going to play hugely into the development of a number of areas, you know, particularly in military, as they start to solidify their Arctic, what they're calling their Arctic strategy, and certainly we are kind of at the forefront of that. Research is, in my opinion, a key component to developing America's Arctic, because you can't just go build a building or build a bridge or create a port, you know, without understanding, you know, what the long-term impacts of it are in a number of different areas. I'm concerned because of the governor's kind of earmarking his cuts towards research, and I guess it's not a question. You just have a thought on that.
I'm not going to try to get into his mind on that. There's a thing in psychology called the fundamental attribution error, and it's when you infer motivation based on observed behavior, and we're almost always wrong. So I'm going to try not to do that, even though it's fun to do. I'm going to try not to do that, and stick with what I see and the position we're taking. When I'm talking about this with the governor, I'm not budging off our goals, and our goals explicitly call for research. We're not budging off our mission. One of the 3 core parts of our mission is research. There's a huge financial argument for research. There's a big national defense argument. There's an economic development argument. We do a ton of stuff for the oil and gas industry and the mining industry and the fishing industry. In addition now, increasingly, national security related research. And I think that's going to take off. So we're not going to budge off that. I mean, he can say what he wants. We're not going to, I mean, it is actually concerned several regents who are, politically more aligned with the governor. They're not happy at all about that crossing the line and starting to poke around and decide what gets done and what doesn't get done. So we will be strong on research, no question. Our delegation in DC is very strong on it, no doubt about it. Even if there are reductions, I've been working with the chancellors. How do we fence off, the research? Because it's just so critical for us. If you walk around a city around the world, or in DC or New York, and people talk about the University of Alaska, and they're smart. It's this flagship campus that they're referring to, typically. That's not to say that UAA doesn't have areas of greatness. It does. And actually, from a research standpoint, some of the research institute directors here have come to me and said, Jim, we really like the idea of one UAA, because there are some really good research faculty in Anchorage and in Juneau, and we'd like to have access to them. And right now, because of our institutional structure, it's very difficult to do that. So there's some opportunities for faculty through this. Yeah.
Number one, we appreciate your leadership and service during these really critical times, because you just look stronger and better every day, while the rest of us are kind of getting worn down.
Tiring.
That single accreditation piece, I personally feel, having professional licenses in every one of the major universities in the state is the single most important thing you can do to prep us for that. For that vision. And while the superintendent can't come out and say that, Dr. Gaborik has said, we see no downside to that, which is political speak for, dear God, please make it happen.
Okay, got it.
And, the final piece is that philosophy piece of playing to win and not playing to lose is really refreshing, because I think many people in the state have gotten into this, oh dear God, the sky is falling.
Right.
But it's happened before in Alaska, and how do we come out of this better, stronger, faster than we were?
We have no choice.
A year ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, we don't have a choice. Well, just quickly up here, Center for Northern Security, and there's a description about that, and each one of these has text behind it, and a link to the 6 people. So, so they're pretty fun. Not deep yet, but very suggestive and evocative.
Mr. Foley, I appreciate you being here and you leading us through this. I have this bumper sticker on my truck, and the part that I do like best is UA Strong.
Yeah.
Because I was here, I graduated with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but I was here when it was the University of Alaska. And I agree with you, Dave, that I think that single accreditation, that one University of Alaska system can be the best for us. And so there can be good that can come of this bad, and I'm going to continue to support you in that effort. And thanks for how you're taking the high road.
I appreciate it. It's hard. I mean, you can imagine it's tough, because in fact, at Senate Finance this year, I remember Don Ardeman presented before me, and it was brutal. And 2 quick stories afterward, I thanked her. She kind of looked at me, why are you thanking me? And I said, for leaving open the field for a positive vision for Alaska's future. Seriously. I mean, but then I went in and began I've been learning a little bit from better leaders and better speakers, and I had my prepared remarks. I don't know, Chad, you might have been there, and I began by recalling a statement that the Supreme Allied Commander in World War I this French general, what he reported out one time, and he said something like, so paraphrasing now, my center is folding, my left is in retreat, situation perfect, I will attack. That was a great quote I heard. And I think the Senate Finance Committee appreciated that. But there's, Alaska Performance Arts and Indigenous Studies and Ethnomedicine and Microgrid Energy Lab, all kinds of cool stuff, so. Well, thank you. I can't do this without you, Paul. It's just too hard. And so when I get encouragement, and it's not about me really, it's about our university, it's really, really appreciated. And it's all across the community. I can't go get out of Fred Meyer's without somebody coming up, or the athletic club, or church, or being around town. And so the airport especially, in fact, it was a while ago, I walked in, it was like getting ready for the early plane down to Anchorage and Juneau, and this one of the ladies there who checks people in downstairs, I walked up and she just walked over to me. There's nobody there because it's so damn early in the morning, right? And she just put her arms out like this. And I got this hug from her. She didn't say a thing. And I just thought, wow, what a place. And that's all across the state too. So I think Alaskans, this is an opportunity for us to come together. That's what we do, and that's what I'm trying to hammer on, because it's just too easy to pull apart. That's the natural tendency, and it'll fail us. So
I think you really have support of the community.
yeah, I think so.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
Give us just a feel of timeline.
Yep. September is when the board comes together, and they'll hopefully approve the plan. Then we'll be going through, and if we can get some budget back in, and I imagine we'll know this week. The governor's saying he wants to move pretty quickly here, so I imagine we'll know the budget this week. So the plan and decision is September. We'll go through the detailed planning and identification of the programs that stay and the programs that don't this fall, and provide notice to people. And so we will shift over, according to my plan, we shift over to one college of fill in the blank January, but we're still under 3 accreditations at that time, okay? And then July, August timeframe, we make the switch to a single accreditation. So that's the highest level, Jomo, the highest level timeline. Tons of people are working on it.
So about a year-long initial process.
Yeah, and as Regent Fate, I hope you take that as a compliment, as he knows, that's warp speed in higher education.
The accrediting agencies are following you and working with you on all these?
Yes, they are. Yep. They get it. I mean, this is a downside of being hammered like this, but the upside is cover of the Chronicle of Higher Education, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. We're getting national coverage because this is proposed anyway, the deepest cut of any state university in the last 10 years. And those folks see, some of them see, wow, this is, Alaska, it's the America's Arctic, you can't do that. But others are seeing the threat to themselves in this. Ooh, is this a national agenda? Do we need to be worried about this?
Read the book Dark Money, you'll understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your support. It's really appreciated, all of you. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks to see you. Yeah.